Hi Aquarius, this is Leah Fresh Astrology. We are looking at December 2017 and I'm going to take into account in this reading, we're going to look at Saturn and the big shift of Saturn from Sagittarius to Capricorn. And we're going to look at Mercury retrograde also in Sagittarius during this time. There's a lot of focus and emphasis in Sagittarius, which is typical for this time of year, but it's even more emphasized because of the Saturn transit and the Mercury retrograde. There's it's like an arrow. The universe is kind of pointing to this area and saying, okay, pay attention here. This is what you need to be focused on right now. So the North Node is another point of interest like that. It's another arrow point. But this is like stuff that's also happening to you and around you, and where people are also doing things of interest at this time of year. It's a normal cycle for you. It's just deeply emphasized this year. So let's get started. First I should say there is an interesting Venus transit also going on at this time. It's the timing of everything. It's when everything's hitting that makes it interesting. Venus is always within a certain number of degrees of the sun. I think it's 48. I could be wrong by a few degrees, but it's always kind of tracking the sun somehow. So it's not unusual for it to be near, but it's just entering Sagittarius just as other things are leaving. It's just the bookending effect, and just exactly the timing of everything is interesting. I'm going to have a separate download on my website to deal with Venus. It's kind of a separate moving part. I want to focus here on Mercury retrograde and Saturn. If you want to go to my website to get the other thing, it's www.freshastrology.com. I also have the 2018 forecast there. So, Saturn. Saturn is a planet that's not completely incompatible with Aquarius. A long time ago, Saturn was more closely associated by astrologers with Aquarius rather than Capricorn. So it's not completely foreign to you. Like there's some signs like, say, Aries. I'm just picking one out of the hat. Where Saturn is maybe not Aries' favorite sign or favorite planet. And Aries is not Saturn's favorite sign necessarily. They're not completely incompatible, but they're not completely on the same page either. Aquarius, you kind of have to work backwards to an older way of thinking of Aquarius. But Aquarius is a lot about an inquisitive mind and learning and pushing the frontiers. Saturn is about learning new things and stretching and growing and maturing. So there's this underlying undercurrent theme of knowledge and learning and stretching and growing through the process of expanding the mind. It's also very Sagittarius. This part of the sky this time of year has a lot to do with that. It's interesting. So, and they each take a slightly different take. Sagittarius has a certain approach to knowledge. Capricorn has a different approach to knowledge, and then Aquarius has yet another layer of meaning, another slightly different way of looking at knowledge. But we can see how Saturn, a long time ago, how there was this kind of underlying theme of learning. So Saturn has been in this area of the 11th house in your chart. The 11th house is kind of your house. It's your area of the chart. It symbolizes, so many things. The individual's future path and kind of planning your own individual path forward. It's also where the individual fits into the whole. It's how you merge and connect with groups of people. And you may have been on a 2.5-year journey of learning how to, in a new way. It's like a 29-year cycle. So it depends on how old you are. It could be the first time you've gone through this, could be the second time, could be the third, maybe. But it's how you connect to the greater whole of humanity, how you fit into groups, how you connect socially. You have been on a 2.5-year journey of working at this. It may have felt sometimes onerous and harder to do, and like you sometimes feeling like you don't know how to do it. But it's just this pathway of working on and maturing and growing in this area of how you connect to the whole, how you connect to the group. Can you play well with others? And I don't mean that in a talking down to you kind of way. I just mean sometimes if we go through times in life where we feel like we can't play nice with others and we don't know why, or we feel like we don't fit in and we don't know why. And that's a hard one for Aquarius. Aquarius is used to, has kind of a gift from birth of just being accepted into groups, more popular than not. People tend to like Aquarius and just kind of accept them more readily, and Aquarius also accepts others in a more open, ready kind of way, or appears to. And there's just this vibe about Aquarius where social interaction is usually gifted somehow, even if inside the Aquarius person they don't always feel that way. There is kind of a greased wheel effect to the way an Aquarius blends in with other people. And Aquarius may take that for granted. It's been something they've had since birth, so when they do feel awkwardness, they don't understand that they actually have this gift of being able to connect to people, but they just don't always experience it from internally that way. So this has been a 2.5 year period of growth, maybe connecting with a new kind of group of people, learning how to fit in a new way, maybe adopting new groups, leaving older groups of friends, and moving into new territory in their friendship world. And it can sometimes feel restricting, like a lot of friends drop away because you've changed. And maybe you didn't even realize you were changing, but you've changed. It may have felt sometimes lonely, like old friendships left. And then now you've been rebuilding in this last phase of Saturn and Sagittarius. You've been building into a new way of relating to people, maybe building, maybe just feeling like you're just barely starting to build relationships with new people, or learning where you fit in a new way. Some version of all of that. And with Mercury going retrograde during this kind of wrap up of Saturn in Sagittarius, it's a time to really review and recognize and develop an awareness of just how far you've come. Look at the entire journey and review it with an eye toward giving yourself a big pat on the back, not chastising yourself, not using this as an excuse to beat up on yourself and go into a descent of crying. Sometimes we need to, when we review, we are also kind of grieving, or we're moved by the experience. I'm not saying there is anything wrong with crying. I'm a big encourager of crying. Crying can be good. But I don't want you to use this review process as a time to beat up on yourself. You know, because with Saturn, there can be a tendency to be hard on oneself. Use this as a time to really honor the way a teacher gives an A. You know, the way a teacher reviews a paper of a student who's come so far, you know, maybe getting the award of most improved student. Use that kind of supportive teacher, the teacher who honors hard work, who gives you extra credit for extra work. Be the teacher who pats you on the back, and be your own kind of guide that way. But take the early, the first 3 weeks, the earlier part of December, to review and look at how far you've come, and look at the journey. Develop that awareness within yourself of just where you are now, how you got here. Look at it, you can kind of see, even if there's no real way to measure it, you can kind of feel and see how far you've come. And how even maybe a year ago you wouldn't have known that you would have made such huge leaps forward in certain ways here toward a new kind of future for you, a different kind of future than you could have imagined 2.5 years ago. This is a totally new thing you've developed, and a new way of seeing your future that didn't exist 2.5 years ago in the same way. Not as clearly, the foundation wasn't as firm there. So that is what's leading up to the movement of Saturn into Capricorn. What Saturn's going to do now is it's going to move into your 12th house that's kind of behind the scenes. It's your psyche, it's the thoughts, the stuff that goes on behind your eyes that people may or may not be able to read. So you may say one thing and be thinking another sometimes. Although Saturn and Capricorn's a lot about authenticity, especially with Pluto there. So it may be a process of, even though there's stuff going on behind the scenes and you're working on yourself in earnest, really working on how you think. Really working on and noticing how you think. Learning a lot. This is a huge time of learning for you, 2.5 years of it. Maturation and learning. And authenticity is going to be a big buzzword for you. Authenticity. Being authentic. Being honest. Being... So authenticity implies a certain kind of transparency, but you're also working on really strong boundaries. What is a strong boundary? Sometimes people perceive a strong boundary as like a wall, a fortress, something that separates. And a boundary is a little bit of the concept of a separation, but it's more of an awareness of where you begin and end, and where another person begins and ends, and where their stuff is and where your stuff is, what you own, what they need to own. That's the kind of a boundary that doesn't really involve a wall or something inflexible like that, but just a constant awareness of where your stuff begins and ends, where their stuff begins and ends, so that you're not taking on other people's stuff, and you're not pushing your stuff onto other people in the form of blame or making other people responsible for you. It's accepting what's your stuff and knowing what that is, and no more than that. Don't accept more than is what yours is. I don't know. I didn't say that the right way. I'm doing these late at night because I didn't have time to do them during the day. We've had fun holidays, fun Thanksgiving with lots of family people coming and going, but it just didn't allow me any daytime, so I'm kind of doing this bleary-eyed at night. But knowing what's yours and what belongs to other people, and when someone else has a whole story in their head and they're kind of going off on their own idea of what's going on, their own interpretation of things, that does not involve you. You're not responsible for that. And other people may try to make you responsible for that, but you're not responsible for that. Nor is anyone else responsible for the story in your head and the way, what you think they should be doing, how you're reading between the lines. Nobody else is responsible for that. That's your story. That's what you're doing inside your head. So that's the kind of boundary stuff you're going to be working on a lot over the next 2.5 years. And ideally, I think with this kind of transit, you're really working on how you think. You may be getting extra therapy, extra coaching, doing a lot of self-help, going on getaways that help you work on yourself. And you can do self-work in a whole variety of ways. You may be working on meditation, but using some time alone to do self-work will really benefit you over this next 2.5 years. You may find also during this time that a parent, an elderly person, needs a little more attention. This tends to be a time when somebody who's older in your life will go in and out of the hospital. Not constantly, but maybe some themes like that. It's also a time where people work on their spiritual connection to spirit, however you think of it, God, nature, the universe, however you think of it. It's developing that relationship, working on that, learning about what it is to be spiritual in a way that's comfortable to you. You may be reading up on, how other people connect, and deciding which one works for you. Maybe learning more about, especially if you're uncomfortable, if you grew up in a household that just didn't talk about spirituality, or a household where religion was like a weapon or something that felt intrusive or damaging or toxic. Unfortunately, that can happen, and people feel very removed from their spiritual core because of a childhood experience. So this is a time of working on that. If you want to know more about Venus in the 11th house and this transit of Venus, you can go again to my website, www.freshastrology.com. You will also see that I have the 2018 forecast up. But I would say this is an interesting time, a time to honor how far you've come, and a time to dive into your spiritual nature, your spiritual core, and some further self-work. I think if you adopt the attitude of this will be fun, I'm going to really get to know myself, and find fun ways to work on myself and connect, I think that works best. And have a great December. Take care.